I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about TFSAs and RRSPs. Are you confused about which one to prioritise? Today I'll answer the big questions. Should you contribute to your RRSP or your TFSA? Is an RRSP really as devilish as some make it out to be? Am I really missing out on thousands in taxes and missed benefits by ignoring my TFSA? As an extra treat, I'll even explain the often overlooked RRSP contribution that you're probably missing out on. It's your favourite Scotsman here again, and let's kick things off with the basics. The RRSP, a Registered Retirement Savings Plan, is a retirement savings account that lets you grow your investments tax-free until you take the money out. You get a tax break when you put the money in, but when you withdraw it in retirement, you have to pay the piper, otherwise known as the CRA. The idea is to contribute during your high earning years, which could land you in a tax bracket as high as say 40 or 50%. Once you find yourself in a lower tax bracket, ideally 20% or less, you can pay that deferred tax by taking the money out. Now, in terms of contributions, you can contribute up to 18% of your earned income from the previous year with a cap that adjusts annually. At the moment, it's set for $31,560 for 2024. You can also carry forward any unused contribution room from previous years, so don't worry if you haven't maxed it out yet. The TFSA or tax-free savings account is the opposite in many ways. You don't get a tax break up front when you contribute. Whatever you earn inside is completely tax-free unless you're using it for day trading purposes, which the CRA classifies as business activity and doesn't like. When it comes to withdrawals, you can take the money out anytime without paying any tax. Yep, that's right, anytime, no questions asked, whether it's for a retirement, trip, whatever your heart desires. Only restriction is if you do take money out of the TFSA, you can't put it back in until January the 1st of the following year. But don't worry, you don't lose that room forever. The amount you withdraw gets added back to your contribution room at the start of the next year. As for the TFSA contribution limit, it's a flat annual amount. Currently $7,000 for 2024, and any unused room from previous years carries forward as well. So, if you've been 18 or older since the TFSA was introduced in 2009 and haven't contributed yet, you can pour in a cool $95,000 today. In short, you don't have to pay any taxes in both the RRSP and TFSA while the funds are invested inside each account. With the RRSP, you get a tax break up front when contributing, but when you do come to withdraw the funds at some future date, every dollar you withdraw is taxable. With the TFSA, there's no tax break up front, but no taxes payable when you withdraw. Got it? Okay, let's move on and establish when you should use an RRSP. As I mentioned about a few seconds ago, if you're in a high tax bracket, there's a very good chance that RRSPs are your friend. Forget what you read on the internet about RRSPs being the devil and a government-run program to steal your money. Simply put, if you're a salaried T4 employee in a high tax bracket, there is no better vehicle to get a break on taxes. Let's say you're making $300,000 a year. A $50,000 RRSP contribution is going to mean you pay about $25,000 less in taxes this year. That's a whack of cash. We can all complain all we want about taxes being high in this country, but the truth of the matter is we have the tools we need to help reduce them efficiently. Just remember that, while we all play by the same rules, everybody has their own circumstances and there's no one-size-fits-all approach. Moving on now, here's a question. When should you not use an RRSP? First off, if you know you're going to need the funds before retirement, the RRSP is probably not your best option, unless you're planning to use it for the home buyer's plan. This allows you to withdraw up to $35,000 a year tax-free for a down payment on your first home. But you'll need to pay it back over a 15-year period. Outside of this though, withdrawing early could lead to a hefty tax bill. Second, if you have a substantial defined benefit pension or an existing RRSP, then you may want to make sure that you have a plan that clearly outlines what your taxes will be in retirement. You might get a tax break now, but you might end up paying more in retirement, and that's before you factor in the potential for OAS clawback, which starts to kick in once you're making more than $90,997 in 2024. That's why long-term planning is so important. Today's decisions should always be in conversation with tomorrow's outcomes. And lastly, on the other end of the income scale, as a general rule of thumb, if your annual income is under $50,000 a year, don't bother with RRSPs. If you're making under 50 grand, you're very close to being in the lowest tax bracket. Contributing to your RRSP could have a negative impact. Let's look at an example. We've got Jim here. He's making 50 grand a year and he contributes $5,000 to his RRSP. He files his taxes, and based on that contribution, Jim's going to get roughly 20% or $1,000 back as a refund. $1,000 in your pocket that you didn't have before? Nobody's going to sniff at that. Fast forward a few years. Jim is now retired. Jim's spouse Janet was a government worker with a sizable pension. To reduce Janet's tax bill, Jim and Janet have decided to split her pension. The result? The income Jim reports on his tax return is $65,000 a year. If Jim wanted to take the $5,000 out of his RRSP that he contributed a few years earlier, he would be paying roughly 30% or $1,500 in tax on the withdrawal. And here's where my expertise comes in. $1,500 is in fact more than $1,000. Add that up over a 30-year retirement and you're talking about a decent chunk of change. Alright, let's move on to TFSA. I've already mentioned the scenarios when not to use a RRSP. In each of those situations, you want to have a long, hard look at a TFSA as a viable alternative. That said though, there's a strong case to be made that everyone should keep a balance in their TFSA. Why? It's easy access to tax-free capital. If all your money is locked up in an RRSP, what are you going to do when the car breaks down, or when the roof needs reshingled, or the furnace sputters out in the middle of winter? Remember, every dollar you take out your RRSP is taxable. So if you do need to take out a large amount for an emergency situation like those just mentioned, this could end up costing you thousands in unexpected taxes. How much should you have in your TFSA heading into retirement? It depends on your situation and how many things you own that could essentially break. If you rent, then you're likely going to need much less than a homeowner. So now you know when to use an RRSP and a TFSA. The secret sauce though is one that most people fall flat on. What tends to happen is that high income earners will contribute to their RRSP, and when they get that fat refund after filing taxes in the spring, they see it as a bit of a bonus and spend it on toys, joys and general fun. Now, if you've listened to this channel before, you'll know that I'm a big proponent of making sure you maximise life in the present instead of putting everything off to some unknown date in the future that may never come. If that is what you want to do with your tax refund, who am I to tell you otherwise? But if you're really looking to maximise your wealth, my favourite strategy is to contribute to the RRSP, take the refund, and then put it into the TFSA. That way, you are slowly building up both. This strategy can also be applied to anyone who's wondering whether they should contribute to their RRSP or pay down their mortgage. Why not do both? Get the RRSP contribution in, then take the tax refund and use that to pay down your mortgage. Very quick break. If you're unsure about how to get the most out of your RRSP and TFSA, or you want a personalised retirement strategy, click on the link in the pinned comments below to book a 30-minute retirement strategy call with me. Alright, back to it. And now I'm going to look at two lesser known strategies that you want to be aware of. The first involves the TFSA, and especially a well-stocked TFSA. The Guaranteed Income Supplement offers over $12,000 tax-free annually to low-income seniors over the age of 65. If your sole income source is old age security, or it potentially could be your sole income source, then you may want to listen a little closer for the next minute or so. I'm not suggesting for a second that you try to live in OAS and GIS alone. Unless you're extremely frugal, you're likely going to need some other access to funds. This is where the well-funded TFSA comes into play. You can use the TFSA to supplement your living expenses, and it is not counted as an income towards the GIS calculation. You could also consider cashing in some RRSP before hitting 65, or contributing to RRSP before 65 and using the deduction later for maximum GIS. A couple of key items for this strategy. Delay RRSP to RIF until 71 and CPP until 70. As an added bonus, remember that deferred CPP until 70 means 42% higher payments for life, while postponing the RRSP conversion lets it continue to grow. The second lesser known strategy is what I call the forgotten RRSP contribution. By December 31st of the year you turn 71, your RRSP must mature. You'll either have to withdraw the funds, transfer them to a RIF, or use them for an annuity. After that, you can't contribute to your individual RRSP anymore. But if you're still working in the year you turn 71, you'll have earned income that could create additional RRSP contribution room for the next year. Here's the catch. You can't contribute to your individual RRSP anymore. This is where the forgotten RRSP contribution strategy comes in. Before the year ends, estimate your current year's income to calculate your RRSP room you'll have for next year, which is 18% of this year's earned income, capped at $31,560 for 2024. So once you've got that, then you make an extra RRSP contribution based on this projected room. While this creates an over-contribution and triggers a 1% penalty, don't worry, it's manageable. File what is called a T1 OVP form to report the over-contribution and pay the penalty, which applies for only a month. For example, if your projected room is $20,000 and assuming you have not used your lifetime over-contribution limit of $2,000, the penalty would be $180. But on January the 1st of the next year, the over-contribution becomes valid as new RRSP room opens up, and you can claim the deduction on your next tax return or carry it forward. In the majority of cases, the tax is saved and the benefit of the tax deferral outweigh the small penalty. Alright, you still with me? Good, because if you haven't done so, book your retirement strategy call with me today by clicking on the link in the pinned comments. And if you want to know what the biggest TFSA mistake most Canadians make is, and then how to fix it, you're going to want to stick around for this next video I've got lined up for you.